Good afternoon, and welcome to the Public Education Subcommittee. Delighted to see so many people here on the first day. We have a few bills that we want to certainly get through. I did want to announce, if you are here for certain bills, there are a few bills that will be passed by for the day, and those bills are SB 819, Senator Barbara Favola's bill, SB 1007, which is my bill. We will pass it by for the day and for the week. And SB 1072 on page 4, Senator John Bell's bill. SB 1102, Senator Boysko's bill. Those bills will be introduced next week. So it looks like majority of us are here. We're waiting for Senator Peake, and he's in the elevator, so he should be here shortly. And our first bill is going to be from Senator Newman because he has an appointment. If you can just, I'll call you up in just a second, but if you don't mind, Senator D-Step, I know you chime in at transportation, hand out my proxies, and I'll come back. Okay. So okay. I appreciate your flexibility. Thank you. Before we get started, just thought we'd do a quick introduction of the committee members who are here, starting to my right with Senator Howell.
Hi, I'm Janet Howell, and I represent the 32nd District, which is parts of Arlington and Fairfax counties.
I'm Mamie Locke. I represent the 2nd Senate District, which is parts of the cities of Hampton, Newport News, Portsmouth, and part of York County.
And I'm Ghazala Hashmi, chair of the subcommittee, and I represent SD 10, which is Richmond City, Chesterfield County, and Powhatan County.
Good afternoon. Siobhan Dunavant, 12th District, Western Henrico, Western Hanover.
Mark Peake, Senate District 22, Lynchburg to Goochland.
And do we need to do a roll call? Just, okay. That counts. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Everybody is here. We don't need to repeat it. Just some basic rules for the subcommittee meetings. This is really the opportunity in the subcommittee to have public testimony, to hear the voices of people who are interested in the various bills, and we certainly want to hear from you. Just some basic ground rules that we will probably have 10-minute limit on bills, on folks supporting a bill, and 10-minute limit for folks who are opposing a bill. That's 10 minutes total, so not 10 minutes for each person who wishes to speak to the bill. Just because we have a large docket, especially next week, we will have a significant number of bills, so keeping that in mind. And one thing I would ask is that anyone who is coming to speak for a bill or against a bill be limiting their comments to the bill itself to address those issues that are outlined and of concern in the proposed legislation, and not any other extraneous points to be made. So for that reason, we will just try to keep things moving along at a good pace here. So welcome again, and our first bill is Senator Newman, and this is SB 883.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman, there is an amendment, if you would consider the amendment. I was working with the Superintendent's Association and others, and the amendment is to have a delayed effective date so that everyone can get themselves in line with this. So if you would consider that, ma'am.
Move the amendment.
Second. The amendment has been moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Senator.
Madam Chair, as everyone in this committee knows, and everyone on Senate Finance has been working on this issue, the learning loss in Virginia has been extraordinary. And one of the key things for us to do is to make sure that we are keeping up with what the data is showing. One of the items that doesn't help as much with that is that the triennial review really is a lagging review, and a time where we've seen learning loss go down because of COVID, and we've now started to see that recover. We really need to be taking the new data, not measuring back on pre-COVID times for our accreditation. The other thing is that I think that we need to be able to be prepared to help schools based on the current information, not on information that is 3 years back. What this bill does now, as amended, it basically delays the enactment until July 1st, 2024, so that everyone can get in line with it. But then it indicates that we will move to a year-by-year review. You may notice that there's not a budget amendment required on this because a lot of that work is being done up front today, but it is not being transmitted and it's not being aggregated. So that is what the bill is, fairly straightforward. I know it's a multi-page bill. All the change is on page 1 except for the enactment clause that you just placed on the bill. Madam Chair, that's the bill, and I think there are some people here to testify for it.
Thank you, Senator. Before we hear from public testimony, does anybody on the committee have comments or questions for Senator Newman? Is there anyone that wishes to speak in support of the legislation? Is there anyone opposed to the legislation?
Move to report.
Madam Chairman?
Yes,
Before we
Senator.
vote, I find this very strange that we're not hearing either in favor or opposed. So,
The Department of Education is here. I don't know what they can say. They're here to speak.
okay, I'm aiming my comments at those who usually do participate here. So you're deafening.
Well, we appreciate that, Madam Chairman. Chairperson, we were opposed, but with the amendments, we are now in no position on the bill. because
And I'm sorry, could you
delayed
introduce
enactment.
your...
Shannon Riddle with the Virginia Education Association. So with the amendments, we're okay with
Your
no position.
no position, you're neutral with
That's
this?
correct.
Is that because, excuse me, Madam Chair, is that because of the delayed enactment?
That's correct.
So without that, would you oppose it or support it?
Well, we would have opposed it because we did not really see a need for it with the potential changes that may be coming with accreditation coupled with accountability. We thought that was a little premature to have a bill to go to an annual review. But since there's delayed enactment, we believe that, there's still time, and I'm sure the department will talk about that.
Okay. Senator Howell. Just in light of that, too, we'll hear from VDOE, but I would also like to hear from our superintendents as well. So, but please go ahead. Thank you.
That's it. Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Shelley Lovingrider. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Student Assessment, Accountability, and ESEA programs at the Virginia Department of Education. And I wanted to speak in favor of this bill. This bill was identified as an issue by department staff who deal with accountability. As Senator Newman noted, currently a school is accredited based on the previous 3 years' data. So under the triennial accreditation provision, a school might be labeled as accredited based on the previous 3 years of data. So if a school is accredited for 3 years, then that school is automatically accredited for 3 more, even though that school's data might show that it is having difficulty. And I'll provide an example. We had a school that was labeled as accredited, but it did show difficulty with mathematics achievement and also had been showing declines over the past few years. As Senator Newman noted, we are concerned with the learning loss and want to make sure that schools are identifying issues and addressing them immediately, and that the department is providing support in a timely fashion. So the removal of the triennial accreditation provision would allow us to be accrediting schools on current year data and provide that support and intervention in a timely fashion.
Madam Chair,
Senator Peake.
questions? Were you ready for questions? Was that your statement?
Is it okay to have questions? Okay.
Are you ready for questions?
If we did this, about how many schools would if you look just to last year, would lose accreditation?
About 136,
Out of how many, Madam Chair? Out of how many?
about 1,600.
And Madam Chair,
Yes, Senator.
is the purpose of this to then allow you to direct the resources to those schools that are showing the loss?
Yes, part of accreditation is identifying schools that need support and supporting them with resources.
Right, thank you.
Are there any additional questions? Thank you.
Madam Chair. Tom Smith with the Superintendent's Association. You wanted to hear from us, and we did talk to our membership on this bill and had some initial concerns about it. But we have to remember that, one, the state board has said it's going to move to separate accreditation and accountability toward that end, and are in the process of trying to do that. So our membership looked at that and said, well, we're reporting this data on a year-by-year basis anyway, and so we just want to make sure that this aligns with where the state board is headed. And so that's why we're in a neutral position, as long as we have the time to understand what's going to happen with the state board and how this would marry with that. And that's why we...
Thank you, Mr. Smith. So you feel that the amendment that we just passed would give you sufficient time to...
Yes, and we asked for the amendment in order for that to happen. But we're
Okay.
still in a neutral position because
Okay.
we want to see how things go.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Madam Chairman, if I could, I'm not sure who the question should go to exactly,
Go
but
ahead,
Tom,
Senator.
it's going to be you. Okay. So if we put on the amendment, which we've done, to postpone it, and it is shown that we're going in the wrong direction with this, what would the next step be?
Well, we would come back and say, we're heading in the wrong direction. We would be opposing
Repeal
things.
this? It would be then to repeal this?
Or to amend it, or repeal it, however you all would feel best is to handle it. Our key is the fact that we need to be heading in the same direction. And the state board, and we have some of our membership, agree with splitting accreditation and accountability. Accreditation, my whole time the majority of it is superintendent, or inputs. You can measure inputs on a yearly basis. The issue is the outcomes. And so we're still waiting to see how that's going to be handled by the state board and how they would suggest it be handled.
And if I might, Madam Chairman?
Yes,
So what's
Senator.
the rush? Why do we need a bill this year if we're postponing its implementation and things are in flux?
Well, there are people that feel you do need a bill this year, and we're just making a statement on the bill.
Any
Well,
other
that's the
questions?
question I'm wrestling with. Why have a bill?
Madam Chairman,
Yes, Senator Donovan.
if I may comment on the bill.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I was floored when we were at the education meeting this year to find out that Virginia is the only state that conflates accountability with accreditation. And we have put our schools and our school systems in such a difficult position on this because accreditation ought to be, am I compliant with safety and everything else? And accountability in medicine, we call that opportunity. When we see a problem or we see something we need, accountability ought to be equivalent to opportunity for us to help. And so I'm thrilled that they're looking at separating those, and I think that the origin of this bill comes from the same place as the people who are planning on separating and giving our schools a break on accreditation and looking at accountability as a way for us to elevate everybody. So I think this is coming from the same place. There's no conflict in play, but if the data is already being reported and we have the opportunity to measure our kids and do better, we ought to be seizing that opportunity.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Smith?
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Hello, my name is Ann Tatus. I am a parent in Chesterfield County. this is my first, I printed them all out and I just had a couple comments. So I think with accreditation, we are looking again at the wrong thing. So Chesterfield County is, what I say is that they value accreditation over education. They are proud of having 100% accreditation, but I've had 7 families running a nonprofit that have contacted me that moved here from other states based off of what Great School says, and they are appalled at the education that their children, that they moved here versus what was said versus what they are receiving. You know, there are certain schools in Chesterfield County that have not had special education teachers, and they have put administrators in the position, which should compromise under the charter accreditation. And we currently have 35 schools out of 65 that are in the green for accreditation, 16 under review, and then the in red, but yet we still continue to have 100% accreditation. And again, it brings the issue, and again, accreditation was suspended in Virginia under James Lane for 2 years. And that has to be factored in too, is that when we have the conversation, it was suspended, and people don't know that when they move here, and we still have 100% accreditation, but for 2 years it was suspended. And then the superintendent coming, you know, from Chesterfield County, where the superintendent has no communication with the community, the parents, does not respond to emails. He has no system in place to actually communicate with his constituents, and that anything, so it alarms me the superintendent, you know, is given all the responsibility when the elected school board are the people that we elected, and the superintendent has no system in place to actually communicate. He only communicates within the buildings of the school, which would be the teachers, the administrators, and they have no actual communication with. And there's 63,000 children in Chesterfield County. It's a very large division that is not talked about enough. And so, you know, I do agree that it needs to be reviewed, but I think, you know, there are several things that I've come to find out that Virginia does stand alone across the nation, and this is the first time hearing about accountability versus accreditation, but is that the broad term is that accreditation over education is that our children are 50th in the nation, as they have been since 2019. And that, what does 100% accreditation when you are 50th?
I'm going to ask you to complete.
Yes.
So you're standing in opposition to, or I'm standing in support of this particular change.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. Thank you very much. And just one point of clarification, as the bill references the superintendent is the superintendent of the state, not the individual superintendents of our local school districts. So just wanted to clarify that. Are there any other points to be made here today? There is a move to recommend that we report the bills, SB 883, as amended. Thank you. That's your move.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we'll take a vote. Did you have any other final comments on it?
Not really. I thought we had kind of solved the problems with the amendment. I do think it's going to let us get support back to schools that need support quicker if we do this. So we're in a unique time, and I think this will help.
Okay. Thank you. All in favor of this bill, say aye. All in favor of this bill,
Aye.
say aye. All opposed, nay. I'm voting no. Okay. We have 2 aye votes, 1 no vote, 2 abstentions. Thank you. Thank you very much, Senator. Okay, and so the next on our list, is it Senator DeStep who's on our list, signed in?
Sign in. Sorry, I can help you watch.
Okay, Senator DeStep, SB 787. Oh, Senator DeStep is not back. How about Surville? We see Senator Surville here. Thank you.
Here we go.
Welcome, Senator Surville.
Thank you. This is Senate Bill 821, which you've probably read about in the papers. Hopefully I've found peace in the valley. I've worked with a zillion people and made a zillion changes, and I think it's mostly in shape now. So this bill has to do with the situation that occurred between Fairfax.
Is there a substitute?
No. No, and this bill, and I made a lot of changes over between November and December, October, actually. So this bill has to do with a situation you may have read about involving the Fairfax County Public School System and the Chesterfield Sheriff's Office, where it was discovered that a Fairfax County middle school guidance counselor had remained in employment within the school system, even though, notwithstanding the fact that he had a conviction for soliciting prostitution, and then he ended up doing it again, at which point they finally figured out it had happened, and there was a lot of confusion about why notice hadn't occurred or whose mistake it was or whatever. And so this attempts to fix it, doing basically 5 things. 4 things, 4 fixes, and then 1 expansion. First of all, the lines 67 through 70 require the superintendent to maintain a list of email addresses, phone numbers, and mailing addresses to receive notifications for these types of problems. I think the reason for that is I'm not sure whose mistake it was that this happened, whether the Chesterfield Sheriff's Office wrote something down wrong, didn't hear something right, whether this Fairfax County Superintendent's Office didn't communicate the right information to them. In any event, I thought all this information should be in one central place online in writing where somebody can go and just look it up instead of having to make a phone call and call the superintendent of a multi-billion-dollar school system with 180,000 students to get this kind of information. So that's what the bill does to try to make the information available and clear. The second thing it does, lines 26 through 29, this has to do with notification upon arrest. And in order to make sure that there's a paper trail of that the fact that notification was attempted or in fact made, it requires law enforcement to notify either by certified mail return receipt requested or by fax and email. That way there'll be a piece of paper somewhere documenting that notification was done and it was received or not received. And it requires that documentation be kept. Third thing the bill does is has to do with notification after somebody's convicted. Right now the clerk of court is required to make notification. This just makes that, it clarifies the notification process for the clerk. Same thing, by certified mail return receipt requested or by fax and email, one or the other. Documentation has to be kept in the file. The fourth thing it does was one of the problems that occurred with this individual who brought this all to our attention was he misled law enforcement about who his employer was, and he wasn't honest about the fact that he worked at a school system. So this requires anytime anyone is arrested for one of these types of offenses, law enforcement has to go into the VEC, Virginia Employment Center database to verify their employment, which is what the Department of Child Support Enforcement does right now to figure out where people work. So it requires that VEC check to see where they work, to see whether or not notification is required, notwithstanding the person may have said, I don't work at a school system or whatever. And then the last thing it does on lines 61 and 62 was a change the Attorney General's office actually requested, which expands the list of offenses that where notification is required. It just picks up a couple smaller sex offenses that were not on the existing list. And when I saw the list that the AG gave me, I said, yeah, and I think we should require notice for those types of crimes when people are around children. And so those are those are the changes the bill does, and with those changes, I think there's happiness all around. There were some concerns about various versions I had before, but I think I've satisfied that. So that's basically what the bill does. Oh, no, the last thing I'll just say really quick is there's been some. All of this becomes moot after the wrap-back system goes live in July 1 of 2025. The wrap-back. You all might have remember the expungement and sealing legislation that I passed with Delegate Herring in 2021, and as part of that, the Virginia State Police had to completely rebuild their computer, their background, their criminal record-keeping system, and Senator Howell was kind enough to appropriate about $20 million to do that, and they're in the process of building that out. But once that new electronic data keeping system is built out, the Virginia State Police will be connected to the FBI's wrap-back program, which will allow for instantaneous electronic notification for any change in somebody's criminal history if they submitted a criminal background check through the state police system when somebody was hired. And so all this paper stuff won't be necessary anymore, because if you have an arrest that hits, or a conviction that hits your Virginia State Police criminal record, an automatic notification would be sent back to the employer instantaneously after July 1 of 2025. And so that's why I had a sunset in here on the very end, 121 through 123, which if you want to take that out, I don't care, but that's why I put it in there.
Yes, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just two questions to understand, because I'm very much in favor of the policy. It's not unlike massage therapy that we did. It's just more complicated. Are you saying that the police would check VEC for every person they arrested for one of these offenses to determine if they were employed?
Yes.
Is that, and I'm guessing that was one of the challenges in the bill. Is that an onerous additional process for them?
The state police actually, or the chiefs of police, did not express a lot of concern about that.
Okay.
We recently got an email from VEC, I don't know if they're here, complaining about that might be an issue for them. But this morning, I think I heard that, but the police didn't seem to think they had a problem with that when I'd reached out to them.
Madam Chairman, one
Yes,
follow-up.
Senator.
Just for my own edification, when RATBAC goes live, it automatically, if you're arrested or convicted, it automatically notifies every employer?
Employers who requested your criminal background check when you were hired, and it will also apply to private employment.
Date it.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
private employers it'll apply to, but it's a subscription service. You'll have to pay some kind of like a fee to the state police to get that continued notification.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from committee members? Is there anyone here who wishes to speak in support of the legislation? Anyone who wishes to speak in opposition?
Move to report.
There's been a move to report the bill in a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? I think we have, and you
Great, thank you.
voted for
Yes, he votes
Senator
yes.
Peake. Okay, so it looks like we have 4 ayes, and the vote is to recommend reporting then.
Should I skip full?
Sorry?
Skip full committee?
Yes, unless there's a problem, then,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. And looks like next is Senator D. Stepback. No. So Senator Chase is up for SB 832. Senator Reeves, your bill is identical to Senator Chase's. Would you both like to present at the same time, one after the other? How would you like to do it?
That's fine.
Okay.
All right. Happy New Year.
Welcome, Senator Chase.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Senate Bill 832 that I was asked by Ann Tatus, who is in the room today and so eloquently spoke on some of the other bills from Chesterfield County representing Virginians for Children First. They're an incredible group of parents who are not politically involved but very involved in their children's education. Basically, what this bill does is it does affect our public schools, and the concern has been, unlike normal years in light of COVID, unfortunately, a lot of the materials that our children are now looking at are online. In fact, in Virginia, my understanding is that 100% of the literature that our kids read, the materials, is 100% online. So a lot of parents during COVID, when they were at home with their children supervising their education, realized what their kids were learning, and some parents were happy, other parents had concerns, and they would attempt to try to address these concerns at their local school board meeting because of COVID restrictions and those types of things.
Many times they were shut down. They were not notified of meetings that they wanted to participate in. So I'm dealing with a lot of very frustrated parents who want to have input into their child's education. This bill specifically honors Code of Virginia 1-240.1, which is the right of the parents, is a fundamental, parents have our fundamental right to make decisions concerning the upbringing, education, and care of the parent's child. What this bill specifically does is it declares that the parent of any student enrolled in a public elementary or secondary school in the Commonwealth has the fundamental right to 10 things. Access a list of any printed or non-printed format, audiovisual, electronic, multimedia, or digital instructional material. Number 2, to participate in the textbook review and approval process. And 3, to receive notice of and give informed consent to any counseling or guidance program offered to their child by the school. We also had challenges, number 4, with access to a child's education records. 5, to receive advance written notice of any school-sponsored field trip, activity, assembly, presentation, or other event at which their child's attendance is invited, including a clear opt-out provision. 6, receive advance notice of any questionnaire or survey to be administered to his child or her child. Number 7, receive notice of and attend any public meeting of the school board in the local school division in which his child is enrolled. 8, to review the annual school board division budget and expenditures. 2 more. Petition the circuit court with jurisdiction over such child's local school division to review an action of the school board if the parent is aggrieved by such action. And then finally, the bill requires the Department of Education to develop and make available to each school board model policies and procedures to ensure compliance with the parental right to review and exempt their child from any printed or audiovisual instructional materials used as a part of the curriculum in any class or course in which such parent's child is enrolled. The bill also revises existing policy and duties of each local school board in accordance with the parental rights to transparency and education. And those are the 10 things that the bill actually does. So, and I don't know if Senator Reeves wants to add to that.
Thank you, Senator Chase and Senator Reeves. Do you have any additional comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just add, in 2013, Senate Bill 908 was the bill that we passed that said parents have the fundamental right for the care, education, upbringing of their children. This is really just a transparency bill. We found out, everybody knows about Loudoun County and what happened, and it's unfortunate, but it was transparency where a parent wasn't aware of what was going on. I passed out to each of you kind of an example of one of the surveys that came home to one of our parents, asking them to go through their parents' medicine cabinet, take a picture of it, and put it on there and give it back to the teacher. You'll see another one in here that talks about, and I've never heard of this because this isn't my area, but I mean, drug enforcement has been, but it kind of goes through and it talks, I understand the intent, but they're talking to kids about different types of drugs and everything else, and some of the language they use when they talk about opioids are that, well, they're not safe, but you know, they're not that bad either, basically is what they're saying. So I think some of that we used to do through the DARE program, but again, parents weren't notified. And your last bit that you're looking at, you have a DESSA assessment, Devereaux Student Strengths Assessment High School Edition 9 through 12. You know, my son just graduated last year, and he took this, and I never knew it. And so for me to go through this, and then I find out once he does this and fills this thing out, and I understand the intent, they're trying to make sure kids and their mental health and everything else after COVID is good to go, but I didn't know about it. But if you look on the last page, there's a circle, and it looks like this. It's not highlighted red in yours, but if you read the writing on there, it says 75 years after a student graduates, completes the Board of Education program, transfers, or withdraws. That's the retention period that they have to hold these surveys. And I don't know who has access to the surveys. I don't know if college admissions are going to use it. I just don't know. But I think, more importantly, this really is just a transparency bill to try to clean up some of the mess that we've been dealing with regard to parental rights and interaction with our schools. And I think we've got to get back to where teachers are talking to parents, administration is talking to parents, and there's kind of an open dialogue that needs to happen, because we're all looking for the best interests of our children. So, Madam Chair, that's kind of another explanation to the bill, and it allows them the time to promulgate those regulations to make sure that they are having that transparency.
Thank you, Senator. I have one question about the survey. Does the direct information, the identifying information about the student stay connected to the survey results, or is that identifying information separated from the survey results?
I don't know that. Maybe Ms. Tatus can, she's here somewhere, I think. Is Ann here? Is that tied to it? Did you hear the question?
The fact of the matter is that there is 400 to 500 data points collected on children, and we don't know. And but part of FERPA being written during the Obama administration.
I'm sorry. If you're going to be answering a question, we'll need you to come up here. But are you answering as a parent or as an expert with the survey?
An expert and as a parent. Is that aggregated versus deaggregated is a question that nobody has been able to answer, and that is one of the main reasons why transparency and parental consent is needed, is because nobody can answer or will answer where this data is going, besides, an example from the statewide longitudinal database system right here from the Institute of Education Sciences that shows where Virginia disperses their data to versus, and so.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't think we know, Madam Chair.
We don't know the answer yet. Okay. Senator Donovan, you had a question.
Chairman, on these materials, where did this come? What is this collated? What is that from?
This is part of a report that I think was FOIA'd when we got it, and we got the information from them through FOIA because we were trying to find out how long they hold on to these reports that they filled out.
I just mean the aggregate data of diagnoses.
Go ahead.
Yes. Devereaux has been around for 80 years, and you can pull up that, so Second Step, many of the companies that are doing social emotional learning use this behavioral screener. And so this one was actually sent to me from a special education parent in Chesterfield, but many of these that are also shown are different behavior screeners that are done throughout the state of Virginia.
Any other questions or comments from committee members? Okay. Are there any in support of the legislation? Are you going to speak in support of the legislation? Okay. If you'll come up and take the chair then. And again, please just limit your comments. Thank you.
So with us being 50th in the nation, again, with fourth grade literacy, reading, 8th grade literacy, and 4th grade math, is that everybody wants to jump to a drastic resolution like school choice, whereas if we take into account that Virginia is one of the only states that has 0 textbooks, we are one of 19 states that comes down from the state level. So because we remove an actual book or paper from parents being sent home, that doesn't mean that the law standing regarding how parents can see material changes. And so from Public School Review, this was in May, they talked specifically about the role of parental involvement. Is academic achievement increases. Parental involvement leads to better classroom behavior. Parents should stay involved in their children's education from preschool to high school. If they are in a Chromebook consistently all day long and have no idea how to review their curriculum to see what their children are learning, how are we ever going to get our children out of being 50th if we're not answering the basic question? It's not simply about rights, which it is a right to not only direct your child, but parents have been completely eliminated. From 2009, there were 16 states basic, and in 2019, Virginia was the only state basic. And that can be found in the History of Standards of Learning by the VDOE and the 2019 Institute of Education Sciences map and in Governor Youngkin's honesty gap report from May, is that parents have been eliminated from the equation altogether. And so instead of jumping to drastic solutions, bring them back to the table. We want to be involved, but it is literally opaque. It is not that it is just not transparent. It is that the right to review curriculum, the right to opt your child out of something that you do not want your child to be taught. That was my child's drug assignment, asking my 11-year-old in the opiate module to go home what prescription medications were in my house, to find a picture of the pill online, then post the pill picture and link. So if we take the 6-year-old who just shot a teacher, the parents are immediately blamed. If my daughter was to overdose, I would be blamed because I did not know that the school had taught her to go look for the medication in my house in the opiate module, how to find it, then list by name hydrocodone, oxycodone, what the names are, and then have pictures of aluminum foil smoking a pipe.
I'm going to ask you to limit your comments. Do we have any others who are speaking in support of the legislation?
There's a lot of people that thought they could speak on Zoom.
We have more folks. This room does not have the technology to do remote testimony. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So again, we need to limit the comments.
I think I'll be less than a minute.
Okay. Thank you.
My name is Eileen Roberts. Excuse me. I had a group called Parents for Life. Parents for Life speaks as a collective voice for the parents of Virginia and throughout the country for the right to know that their child is being influenced by outside authorities and usurping parental rights. So no matter what educational issue, especially denying a parent the right to know before any unfit material, which is inappropriate for little eyes, parents are the ones to unravel the harm done to their child. And in some cases, responsible for any mental health issues which could arise from exposure to inappropriate material, like pornography, for instance. Parents raise their children and always keep their children from harm in all areas. And this bill will assist parents with their God-given responsibility to protect children and their upbringing.
Thank you. One more? Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Sherry Story, and I represent the Family Foundation. We support parental oversight and transparency for students. One of the things I'd like to emphasize is that it promotes trust. You can see that when trust is broken a little bit, then it affects a long-term contention between parents and schools. And I think now is a time when we need to build trust. And the more oversight and the more transparent schools are, the more trusting parents will be with their children and who's handling and during the classroom, et cetera. So transparency and trust go hand in hand. And that's really important for a child's education because we all want parents to be supportive of what's going on. But if you destroy trust and you don't allow parents to see if all of a sudden the parent feels that there's a hesitation, it just starts to destroy that trust. So it's certainly been affirmed over and over in Supreme Court cases, Troxville v. Granville, Prince versus Massachusetts, and Parham versus JR, that parents do have a fundamental responsibility and right to oversee their child's education. So we support the bill.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And do we have any who wish to speak in opposition to the bill?
Madam Chairperson, I'm Shane Riddle. I'm with the Virginia Education Association, and so our board has taken a position to oppose Senate Bill 832 and Senate Bill, 1199.
Yes.
And we do believe in parental involvement at the school level, and we do believe that parents and teachers need to, collaborate together, especially on educational outcomes for their children. We just have a problem with some of the enumerated points in the bill. specifically number 3, where it talks about counseling services. A lot of kids need counseling services because they're being abused at home. So that's just one example. We believe that there could be a data transparency bill or some type of legislation that we could agree on. We just don't believe that it's this right here. And so we definitely need a lot of time to work on something. But this is just not the right way to go.
Thank you, Mr. Riddle. Thank you.
Madam Chairman.
Yes,
Follow-up
Senator
question.
Donovan.
Yes, Madam Chairman. So number 3 is an issue. Are there any other numbers specifically other that are an issue?
Well, we
That are an
believe that
obstacle?
most of the enumerated points that are in the bill, we believe that most of these things can be handled at the local school division level and are already being handled at the local school division level with parental involvement, and that it's not necessary to codify this into state code. That's our belief.
Madam Chairman, follow-up
Yes, Senator
question.
Donovan.
So would you say that there maybe is a little bit more of a rift between parents and schools at this juncture after COVID and other strains we've had in Virginia over the last year or two?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And so,
I believe some of it has been manufactured, but yes, I believe there is. Of course, and we also know that not as many parents are involved in their child's education that should be involved in their education and engaged with the school district and with teachers. I mean, I think, if I'm not mistaken, most research shows that it's less than 20% of parents that are actually engaged. We wish that it was more.
Madam Chairman,
Yes,
follow-up.
Senator Donovan.
So it seems that if these things are mostly already being done and we want to engage the parents that want to be involved and inspire other parents to be involved, having a statewide framework for that is probably a really good idea.
Maybe, but I mean, we believe that it should also be done at the local school division level with each school division.
Madam Chairman,
And
follow-up.
that the state should not
Donovan.
necessarily be involved in enumerating the things that should be, that some of them that are listed in here. I mean, I'm not so sure we have a transparency problem as much as an engagement problem, with.
Madam Chairman, I would reiterate that if it's not a problem in transparency on your part, then it's probably not a problem to codify them. But many guidelines in the state of Virginia, many we've discussed over the last 8 years, start with a framework from Board of Education and are adopted by the localities in order to kind of get to that end goal and ensure that balance that we constitutionally have. So is there maybe an opportunity for that we would direct the Board of Education to come up with these guidelines, which would allow for a conversation and more time so that we could embrace transparency?
Well, I think that's probably an important question that you may need to ask the School Boards Association or maybe the superintendents. I know that from our perspective as a teachers organization, we are very aware that some teachers and parents are not working as closely together as they should be, really. And some of that is on the ability of the parents to engage. I mean, sometimes it's not even, they're not even to blame. I mean, some parents work 2 and 3 and
Right.
sometimes 4 jobs, and they're not as engaged, in the school environment with their child. And so, from our perspective, we always encourage our members to make sure that they reach out to their parents and be involved and even in most cases, go door to door to those homes and survey those parents and engage those parents if they're not as engaged, with academics, things that the child is dealing with at school, or even things that they're dealing with at home. So, from our perspective as an association of teachers and support professionals, we encourage them to make sure that relationship is nurtured and that it's there.
Mr. Riddle, I have some questions too. Are you finished,
Yes, ma'am.
Senator
Thank
Donovan? Would you agree that there are multiple opportunities for parents to be engaged in the review of instructional materials and opportunities for parents to have conversations with their child's teacher about what is being covered in the class, as well as textbooks?
I mean, from my perspective, I absolutely do.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Would you agree also that it's number 3 in particular? I'm sorry, not number 3. When we have a statement such as parents will be notified, and I'm not finding it on here. Oh, number 5, that parents will receive written notification for any school-sponsored field trip. I personally never had a child who went on a field trip without my necessary signature. I think that is already in place. But receive written notification of any activity, that's a rather broad term, every day of the instructional calendar. There are multiple activities going on, I would think. Any school assembly, would that also possibly include pep rallies that children or students go to on Friday afternoons to support their high school teams? School-sponsored presentations. It seems to me that the language is rather broad and over-encompassing and would present a challenge for any school, any teacher to try to make sure that they are meeting all of these various requirements. Would you agree or disagree with that?
Well, let's just talk about number 5. So I cannot answer positively that every single school or teacher or administrator would give notice of these things or permission slips for a child to attend an extracurricular activity or a field trip or another activity within school. But I can answer for myself personally that, in 6th grade, 5th grade, 7th grade, middle school, we received permission slips that went home with us that our parents had to sign before we could even go on a field trip or participate in some other activity. Now, I can't say that was back in the early 70s for me. So I'm sure that still takes place today. I mean, I would be surprised if it didn't.
For liability issues.
For liability
certainly.
issues
Yeah,
and other things like that. So, I can't positively say that with,
Okay.
but in my personal experience and the teachers we represent, we don't necessarily talk about these type of things when we meet and have meetings, but I'm sure it's a protocol for teachers to do that. And I'm not so sure that they do not. They may also learn this in the education programs that they attend at the universities, for education preparation and their pedagogy. So,
thank you.
and the way they handle classroom management protocols. So, I'm sure they do have these. Yeah.
I'm sorry? Any other questions? Yes, Senator.
But aren't school board meetings public knowledge? Aren't they made public or publicized?
Yeah, the School Board Association would be better to ask that question
okay.
too.
I'll wait, because there's another one dealing with
my
the
personal
budget.
experience, they are, but they could give you a better answer, I'm sure.
Thank you. Thank you for answering our questions. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition?
Madam Chair, Tom Smith with the Superintendent's Association. I'm not sure I can add much to what Mr. Riddle has said, except for that parent and student engagement have always been a high mark of what our association has been about, particularly since the pandemic. and working back with parents. I can say that of the items on here, I would say most, if not all, of them in some way require some sort of parental involvement. Particularly, you talked about field trips. I do know that those typically require parental signature because we have to worry about those children who don't go and whose parents don't want them to go. We have to find activities for them to do that. So I want to say that we're very much engaged in parental involvement and are concerned about this bill. We don't feel it needs to be in the code. We reach out to parents. We work very hard to do that, and so we are in opposition.
Thank you.
I have one question. Isn't the annual school division's budgets and expenditures made public?
Oh, yes, ma'am. In fact, I think we have to put it on our website
Right.
because you all ask us to.
Okay, right. Okay.
Thank you. Looks like we have one additional speaker in opposition.
I'm just going to answer questions if there
Oh, okay.
are questions.
About the,
Please come up.
the public meetings of the school board?
Yes, that's already required under state FOIA, as Tom mentioned with the budget. Access to student records is required under federal and state law. What this bill does is make those fundamental rights, or calls them fundamental rights, but I think everything on this list pretty much is already addressed at the local level or already addressed in code.
And are you speaking in behalf of?
I'm sorry. My name is Stacey Haney, and I represent the Virginia School Boards Association. So happy to answer any other
Is the
questions.
School Board Association taking a position on this bill?
We do have some concerns, as I think some of the earlier speakers indicated. We believe that these are best addressed at the local level with local people who are accountable to their constituents locally.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One more speaker.
Very short, Madam Chair. Becky Bowers Lanier, and I'm representing the School Counselors Association, the Counselors Association. And I sent this out to my counselors, and I just want to read a comment that one of the counselors sent back. She's a high school counselor. Oh, rats. There we go. I would want to know the definition of informed consent and guidance programming, which is in the bill. Like, for instance, is my meeting with children to review their academic progress a guidance program? And if so, does every parent have to sign off on my meeting with their child or going into their class? We allow parents to opt out of counseling services, but they don't opt in. So if this would mean opt-in, it would make my job a lot tougher, and the kids who need me may not have access. I'd also like to know more about needing written notice about presentations. For example, I'm going into classes next week to talk about scheduling. Is that a presentation? Seems silly. The line about questionnaire and surveys is annoying to me as well. I sent a survey to all seniors on Monday to ask them where they are with their post-secondary plans and who still needs help. I don't feel a parent needs to see that first. So I thought you might appreciate some boots on the ground sort of presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. Senator Chase or Senator Reeves, do you have any follow-up? 1 minute, yes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we're in concurrence, and we've heard from the entities that are engaged on both sides of the issue. I think the bigger picture for me is maybe we need to look into it. Maybe we shouldn't throw a bill forward. Maybe we can have an opportunity to have a letter from the chairman, to go to the BOE, to tell them to look at transparency across the board when it comes to parental involvement. I know the VEA sat here and told you that what happened back then and what happened with me, it's totally a different time frame now. And parents are awake, and they're angry, and they're upset, and you've all heard from them, and they want to know what's happening with their kids. And I understand both sides. I truly understand. I was a high school football coach and talked to a lot of my players that were dealing with difficult issues. And so I just think somebody else needs to look at it. If we're not going to try to legislate to try to fix those problems, I personally, and Senator Chase maybe has a different idea, but I would like a letter from the chairman to send up to the BOE to ask them to conduct a study so we can actually know what schools are doing.
So for your bill, you will ask that we recommend that a letter go from the Chair of Education and Health.
Yes, ma'am, to go and ask specifically to deal with the transparency with their parents in education. Thank you, Madam
Thank
Chair.
you, Senator Reeves.
I would make that motion. Second.
Do you want to do it for both bills? It sounded like, or, well, yes, let's do it. We should vote on that recommendation. So we have a recommendation and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Senator Chase?
I basically just want to speak on behalf of some of the parents that have come to us, and I was listening to Dr. Riddle, and I would just encourage you to reach out to the parents of these school boards. I'm talking to Loudoun County, where I've spoken to the father whose daughter was raped. And what a tragic story that is, and the cover-up that occurred as a result of that. There are many concerns in Chesterfield County. There's a major disconnect going on right now between our local governments, the school boards, and the parents. And so we just want to, Senator Reeves and I want to just make sure that the parents' concerns are being addressed. This is a totally different era. I grew up through Chesterfield County Public Schools. This is a different day and time with all the new technology, and parents do want to know what their kids are learning in the school systems. They really do want to know. And there are the parents who are engaged, we need to give them that information and not keep them in the dark. So I'm going to advocate for more transparency and education so that parents can stay involved, and I think we owe that to them.
Senator Chase, are you asking for the same recommendation as Senator Reeves just did, that a letter go from the chair to the...
Let me ask you this. Would we be able to pull my bill and have a chance to work with the stakeholders on it? Would that be something y'all would be willing to do? And give us time to reconstruct the bill, whatever
I'd like
parts?
to pass the bill by for a
You
week,
can-
is that...
Pass it for the week.
Senator?
But I will point out that certainly all of Northern Virginia and virtually all of the state has elected school boards now. And parents do speak directly to the elected school boards. And it has always been my position that it's better to do it at the local level through those local elected officials than have us in Richmond dictate down to them.
Right. May I respond to that, Madam Chair?
Please.
I actually have video footage, which I would be happy to at another time, to show you from Montgomery County, where I have a parent that is trying to speak and advocate on behalf of her kids to the school board meeting, and she's completely shut down. Another one from Loudoun County, where a father is actually arrested, taken out for expressing his opinion. So I think there is some opportunity for improvement. Maybe we could talk about what that is, and I'm happy to work with you on coming up with something.
Senator Chase, what is your goal with this bill? You would like to pass it by for the week and come back with
Yes,
another
ma'am.
bill
Let's
next
pass it
week?
by for the week, if that's okay with you all.
That will work for this committee.
Okay, thank you. I do appreciate it.
Senator Chase, one thing I would just ask, that when we see the bill again next week, that we have very, very limited public testimony on it. Perhaps just you present on behalf of your stakeholders. Thank you. Okay. Senator D-Step is back, so let's go to Senator D-Step, and that is SB 787.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, this is similar to the final version of the bill that we presented last year. And it's very clear. We've worked with groups on both sides. We have some that still support it, and we have one or two that are still against it. What this bill does, it requires each local board to adopt a policy addressing the selection and evaluation of all printed and AV material purchased or donated to or otherwise made available to school divisions that'll be made available to students in school libraries, with clear procedures for, one, mandatorily prior written parental consent before a student is permitted to check out from the library any such printed material or AV material that depicts children engaged in fondling of sexual or genitalia parts of another, fondling of his sexual or genital parts by another, masturbation, sexual intercourse, cunningless, fellatio, analingless, anal intercourse, or object sexual penetration, and handling challenged, controversial instructional material. The reason for this bill is we still have issues with our libraries carrying material that's considered grooming, and otherwise it would be against the law. However, libraries, as well as our museums, are exempt from our grooming laws. And the reason I've pushed this forward again is we have X ratings for our movies with this types of activities. We have the FCC regulating what comes on our televisions and radios. We have parental controls on our phones, computers, televisions. Netflix, Amazon, Paramount Plus, and all the other online type of content providers have parental controls, yet our school libraries don't. We require parental permission for aspirins and other medicine, playing sports, going on field trips. Even when a child's out sick or has to go to the doctor, we require parental notification, or the parents have to provide a letter saying it's okay for my child to leave for this appointment or this meeting. We need to protect our children's innocence as long as humanly possible, and I think it's a sad state when our children are safer turning on a TV or radio than perusing their local school library. I think that there's a definite need for this, and I think that I'm not asking to ban books or burn books or anything else. I'm just saying for any child under 18, and these books are in our middle schools, so our 10, 11, and 12-year-olds are seeing these books, checking out these books without parental permission. I'm just saying I'd like to see parental permission for what otherwise in any other place other than a school library or an art museum, and I'm not addressing art museums here, but other places, they would have to have parental permission because they would be rated by either the FCC or they'd be rated by the movie industry or even the online content of the radio entertainment industry. I believe we have speakers.
Thank you, Senator DeStep. Before we go to any speakers, are there any questions from committee members? Senator DeStep, I'm just curious about the premise of the bill. It seems to indicate that perhaps our school librarians are not in a position or not doing what they are trained to do, which is to curate the school libraries, that they are responsible for using a set of professional guidelines, their own training to find age-appropriate materials and to ensure that there is integrity in the school library system. Are you suggesting that they are not following their professional guidelines in identifying age-appropriate materials in schools?
I'm not suggesting anything. I'm saying that school librarians do not have the complete authority on which books are in their libraries or not in their libraries. We'll hear from librarians today, and we'll also hear from the Library Association, and we'll hear different opinions on that. So I look forward to hearing from them, but I will tell you, at least the librarians I've talked to have no control over what the children can and can't check out in a middle school library or a high school library.
Thank you, Senator DeStep, but they can control what's in the library.
The librarians I talked to said they have no control over that what comes to the library is directed by our school board and the school association or our school administration.
Okay, thank you. And so the school board, the local school board, could take action and determine what should be placed or not placed in our school libraries.
Correct. Our local school board can and has to a point. They have a review committee. However, to get to all of the books that have this type of activity in them, graphically and such, that committee has said that it would take a couple of years just to get down that path.
Thank you, Senator. But your bill then is requiring that we do that, right? That
My
all
bill is
materials be
requiring
reviewed.
that they do that.
So a couple of years to review every material, every book, every audio-visual material that's in the school library.
The ones that we know have these issues. We have a lot of books that go to our libraries that our librarian has never seen before.
Okay.
But I'm going to
Perhaps I'm not asking the right. So how do we know which books? How do we select which books or which materials ought to undergo this?
That are age appropriate. I think it's very clear in the bill where we talk about the type of activities that the books depict, either graphically or the AV material depicts graphically, that should be included in the reviews and have a parental oversight of. So have the parents make a decision on, yes, it's okay for my kid to see this book or not. But we specifically put in there what actions and activities are depicted in the books, whether graphically or in the AV material, pictorially, that should be allowed, that the parents have a position on, yes, I want my child to see it, or no, I don't.
Madam Chairman?
Yes, Senator Donovan.
Just a question. If I'm reading this correctly, you are empowering the school boards here, correct? This is a laundry list of things that they already have to kind of evolve in their own school district with the parents. I think it says consideration. I think it's putting this under a section where it's just asking them to consider their policy with the input of teachers, parents, and other citizens. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Senator Donovan, correct.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from committee members? I think we probably will have quite a few folks here to speak on both sides of the issue. So I am going to religiously restrict to 10 minutes, and I'll ask our clerks here to help us with that. So folks who want to speak in support of the legislation that we have in front of us, are you the only person who will be speaking? Okay, we have, just to get a sense of how many. So we will ask you to restrict your comments just to this particular bill, but please come on up. And 10 minutes on both sides.
Thank you, Madam Senator. In the study of, as I researched this, I speak for the Family Foundation, and my name is Sherry Story. The National Library of Medicine Journal is now publishing articles since this has been, we've gotten into this very graphic and open time where you can observe this. They're now doing studies on what is the relationship, is there a causal relationship between adolescent exposure to sexual materials and then engaging in risky behaviors as they grow older and experimenting in adults. So the conclusion, I have 3 or 4 conclusions, but respecting time, I will read one. Exposure to sexually explicit media in early adolescence had a substantive relationship with risky sexual behavior in the emerging adulthood. Knowledge of this causal-like effect provides a basis for building better preventative programs in early adolescence. And so what are we setting them up for later? And then I'll come from a school district, school board perspective. Is it now going to be possible that a student who gets themselves in trouble or another student, that the district could be sued because they were allowed and had no oversight by seeing these materials? And they will come back and say, my student even engaged in some kind of activity like strangulation for getting a high, that they lose their life. And who's going to be liable for that if they can show that after repetitive being in the library, they looked at these materials over and over and over and over? Are school districts not liable? Versus if you have parental oversight and parent has signed off on them, does this not protect school districts then from that kind of lawsuit? That no, the parents gave permission, and so therefore they could not come back on the school district. I just question that. I think we should protect our adolescents. So this would be protecting schools, school districts, and giving parents oversight. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you for your testimony.
Just a quick comment to reiterate what I said, but I support what the Family Foundation is representing in their statement. And, you know, Parents for Life, we love our children. We want them to have a good life. And I would just ask this committee to consider your own children and grandchildren when making these decisions.
Thank you. You have a timer going. Yes, thank you.
And I'm also going to be extremely quick. I'm speaking not only as a parent, but I'm speaking as a survivor of child sex abuse through grooming, specifically with sexually explicit material from the age of 6 to 10, and what it does to you as a child when your innocence is murdered with images that your brain cannot process. None of you, unless you have been through what I have been through, can fathom what that does to a child, and it is literally the murder of child innocence with showing the material that their brains cannot process and will never get rid of.
I'm
Yes.
terribly sorry for the experience that you went through as a child. Did you receive those materials from a school library?
I did not, but it does not change where it came from, because why are we protecting material inside of a school that would be illegal outside of a school for an adult to give to a child?
I think the question, yes, but I understand, and I think the question is, are those materials in the school as well? So that is.
Yes, the materials are.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to the bill? And again, we will limit testimony to 10 minutes, so.
Good afternoon, Bev Lammy, representing Henrico County School Board, and I think we had some of this discussion, yes, last year and in previous times. I sent you all some information. I am a lifelong librarian, English teacher, and I have observed over the years exactly how we order books and materials in our schools, and I think maybe that would help you all to understand that we really pride ourselves, I think, as a profession on using professional materials, professional journals. These are put together by people that are actually in the field of teaching children and making sure that the materials are age and developmentally appropriate. And also, you need to make sure as a school librarian that it's appropriate for your community. Our community might not want something that's in this particular subject area, another community might. So I think that's where the whole process of selection of these materials comes forward. There may be some materials that parents would challenge. We want parents to be involved with the whole process, particularly at the elementary level. The parent pretty much knows what days that the library books are coming home in the backpacks. Middle and high school, maybe not so much, but we do have an incredibly good process that has worked really well. Instructional Materials Review Committee, if there's something that comes along, a parent thinks it should not be in a school library, we take the book, we have a standing committee that reviews that. They make a recommendation to the board as to whether it's something that they feel like maybe needs to be moved to another level library. But it's a very, very, it's a process that involves a lot of people. It is not like just randomly done, certainly. And I think one of the things that I've always tried to help people understand about book challenges is that book or that material may not be appropriate for your child, but you do not have, as a single parent, the really responsibility of choosing books for all the other children. It may be that's the perfect book or a perfect story for someone else.
Thank you.
Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Always good to see you. Couple of questions to follow up on that. So if you have all of those people that are collaborating on the materials, what's the harm in having the parent?
We invite parents to look at it. It's just when this particular bill, the way I interpret it, would be that a parent would have to review the book in order to get it approved to put on the shelf.
Madam Chairman,
Please go ahead.
I think that the bill actually says that the parent has to approve that child signing it out, not you putting it on the shelf.
Right.
Follow up, Madam Chairman. So if indeed you say that book may not be appropriate for your child, but it may be very appropriate in that district or for another child, aren't we saying the same thing, that the parent should have a say?
parents certainly help in as far as the selection process of materials for their children in all kinds of ways. But to establish a process that parents need to come and review materials in a formal way, like they would be, and they certainly are, they participate in our instructional materials review process if there has been a challenge. But to have a parent involved in the selection process of all the books at the elementary level, middle school level, high school level, I just think the process would be very challenging.
Madam Chairman.
Please go ahead, Senator.
I agree with the process you're describing, but that is not the process for this bill. And so this is not about, what's on the shelf. This is about any books that contain, or materials that contain these explicit issues only, not everything, just these explicit issues, that the parent has to give consent for those materials or those
if
books.
those materials are actually in a library.
Well, sure, if they're not, then you don't need the parents'
school
consent.
library. I'm not aware of any of our school libraries that have
Madam Chairman.
purchased anything of this sort.
Senator, go ahead.
But if there were, you would be okay with the parent having a say?
Certainly, parents always have the final say as to whether their child should have materials or not.
Okay, so one follow-up question, Madam Chairman. So if the school board works out what that process is for the parents to have a say, which is what the bill aspires to do, we could overcome the obstacles and figure out how to do that so they have a say. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Jenny O'Halloran, I'm here on behalf of the Virginia Association of School Librarians. The association opposes this bill. Only thing I'll add to what Ms. LeMay said is that school divisions already have publicly available databases that are searchable by parents and members of the public that include audiovisual materials and are available for anybody to take a look at any time. And in addition, school divisions already have policies in place for material selection that's updated regularly and also accessible to parents and the public.
Madam Chairman, question?
Yes, go ahead, please.
I think we ran into a snag when we discussed this last year. Are universally all of the materials in every school library available on those online sites?
That's my understanding.
That is not my understanding. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. It's my understanding, too, that everything is, at this point now, publicly available on digital resources, databases, that because they have to be cataloged, and we no longer have a paper cataloging system for materials, and whether it's public libraries, school libraries, university libraries, so everything is available online for...
I apologize, Madam Chairman. I do have a follow-up question.
Please go ahead.
So those are available to every parent in the state if they...
Yes, correct. That's my understanding.
And so, Madam Chairman, if a parent objects to the material that they find on that website, how are they able to intervene?
Yeah, Madam Chair, there's each school division has a challenge procedure in place, and so it varies by school division, but there is processes in place in every school division to challenge that material.
Thank you. That's my understanding, too, that we have policies in place at the local school levels. Please go ahead, Mr. Abram.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, Phil Abraham, representing the Virginia Library Association. Before just giving my remarks, I wanted to respond to Senator Donovan. If you look on lines 21, the current law begins with the selection and evaluation, and then in the new language says, and all printed or audiovisual materials purchased by, donated to, or otherwise made available to the school division that shall be available to school students in school libraries. That isn't modified by the sexually explicit language. So the bill does require involvement in the selection of all materials. And that's one of the concerns that the school libraries have about the burden that would place on it. Well, my focus in representing Virginia Library Association for the past 30 years has been on obtaining funding for our local public libraries. We stand with our school librarians today in their concerns with this legislation. We certainly don't minimize the concerns expressed by parents and recognize the central role they play in their children's education. We have a few concerns about this bill that have been mentioned, but I think it's important to remember, as we talked about last year, the distinction between the classroom and school libraries. Students don't have a choice in the classroom in what they read, and your legislation last year, Senator Donovan, addressed that problem. And in fact, if a teacher tells their students in their class, you have to go check a book out and do an assignment, your legislation and the policies adopted by the Department of Education will apply, and the parent would have to approve that, have a right to approve that. But this gets in the school libraries, it's just the opposite situation. Children have a choice of what books they read. They're not mandated to read them. So I think that's an important distinction. As has been explained, all school divisions have existing procedures that give parents a significant opportunity to know the books that are in their school libraries and to challenge books that they find objectionable. And I think this debate today is a result of those procedures that are in effect. Parents are very much involved in books in their libraries, and they're challenging them. Some are getting removed, some are getting retained, but we're allowing that to be handled at the local level. But third, this legislation would put a tremendous burden on school librarians and school libraries, requiring them to get involvement in the selection of every book, but then also requiring a mandatory written parental consent for books that are discussed in this legislation would be burdensome for school libraries. I would add, too, that it says depict, and depict is not just visual, it's words. So I think that's a complication with the legislation. And finally, just circling back to my initial point, I think parental responsibility has a role to play in this. If parents don't want their children to read books that have sexually explicit materials in their school libraries, I'd hope they'd tell them. And if the child doesn't listen to their parents and does it, I think you've got a much bigger problem than what's in the school library. They're going to go find it other places. So, with all due respect to the patron, we do oppose this bill.
Madam Chairman, quick question.
Yes,
Could you
Senator.
explain the challenge process to me? So a challenge is, if I understand it correctly, you're saying it's to remove the book from the library and not just
Correct.
determine. So that's a much higher threshold than just saying, I don't want my child reading that.
Correct. And I will add, there are a number of school libraries I know do allow the parent to say, I want my approval before you can check out a sexually explicit book. Those are procedures that are established in individual libraries, individual school systems. We heard that testimony last year. It's not mandated in every single school division as this and school libraries this bill would require.
So, Madam Chairman,
Yes, Senator.
that means that it's not that onerous in those locations that are actually doing parental consent.
Well, no, it is onerous because in the locations where it's being allowed, it's done when a parent asks for it. This would have to be done in every single case. When that book is pulled from the shelf, the librarian would have to go and ask the parent.
Madam Chairman.
Kind of an opt-in versus opt-out situation.
Just to follow up, we've now ranged from there are no materials that contain this information to there are so many that it would be hard to somehow manage the volume.
Senator, I'm hearing it differently than you. It's not that there are so many materials that contain sexually explicit content. It is that there are so many materials in the school library. This bill requires a study of every material, whether it falls into the category of sexually explicit materials or not. There has to be an examination of every material. I'll just give you an example. William Bradford, one of our pilgrims, or original pilgrims who sailed over on the Mayflower, governor of Massachusetts, one of the earliest governors of Massachusetts. William Bradford's journal details rather explicitly instances of bestiality that occurred in Plymouth Colony. Would that be sexually explicit material? Should that be banned? So if you're talking about having to review every material, we don't know what a book contains or doesn't contain. The title may not tell you what a book contains or doesn't contain. We are requiring then our school librarians, our school staff to review every material that's there, rather than giving the parents the responsibility of monitoring what their children are encountering. We're also assuming that our school libraries are full of pornographic material. I find that hard to believe. Both of my girls went through public schools, through Chesterfield County. I never had an incident where they encountered any material in a school library that I would object to. So I find it hard to believe that our schools are brimming with pornography.
Madam Chairman.
Thank you.
Follow up and speak to the bill. I think the points are well made that the lines 21 and 22, with the way they're positioned, is a problem with the bill, and that if you want to have donated materials or other materials that were not purchased that have another threshold by which they are evaluated, you should not include that in the bill in those lines. But I want to point out, Madam Chairman, we didn't say ban. We just said parental consent. And, I think it's really interesting when we talk about age-appropriate materials. That is a vast generality that has guidelines, but every child is an individual, and the parents preserve that individuality, and age-appropriate may not be appropriate for that child. And so that collaboration between parents, especially for materials that parents can ban in other contexts, I think is very appropriate, and I suggest some amendments on the bill, but move to report.
I just wrap up on
Please
this
offer some final comments. Thank you.
And I just want to clarify a couple of things, and I really paid attention. This isn't to review and remove any books from our library. This says that if that material, when not found in a library but any other place in the Commonwealth, if I gave this book to a child under the age of 18, I would be arrested for grooming. That's it. It says if that's illegal anywhere else other than in a school library, that's considered grooming. I'm saying, I'm not going to say ban or remove or burn or anything else. I'm saying have the parents say it's okay for my child. We have children in middle school who have access to graphic novels with very, very graphic sexual material that I would never let my child, when they were in middle school, check out. I just wouldn't have done it. And I can tell you that my child's school didn't have it when my children went there. But if my child had been given that anywhere else other than in their school, that individual who gave it to them would be charged and arrested and charged for grooming. So why would we say that I, as a parent, can't control my child having access to this material? The law does it everywhere else outside of the library, with the exception of our school libraries. I'm saying, let me as a parent say, yes, it's okay for my child to do it, or no, it's not okay for my child to do it. I'm not saying ban it. I'm not saying burn it. I'm not saying remove it from the library. I'm saying give me the authority to say that what the law does outside of the libraries, they would be charged and found guilty. Within a school library, libraries are exempt. I think when the code was written, they didn't think that there would be this type of graphic sexual content in a middle school library. And we have students in our middle schools that are 8, 9, and 10 because they've skipped grades, they've advanced. I don't think it's appropriate for them. I didn't think it was appropriate for my children at the time, but I'm not their parents. I'm just saying I want the parents to be able to say, yes, I want to. If it's illegal outside of the library, I don't want my child seeing it inside the library. That's like saying, hey, outside the library, my kids can't drink alcohol. Inside the library, they can. I don't agree with that premise. But I'm not trying to say you have to review every single book. I'm saying you have to review the books that have these types of sexual activity that outside of the library would be considered against the law as grooming. That's all this bill says. I'm not asking librarians to, and I'm glad Beth, when she was here as a librarian, said, hey, we allow our parents to go through this. We don't have this type of material in our libraries. And I've never said our libraries are brimming with this. At last count, there was about 115 books in our library. That's not brimming. There are hundreds of thousands of books in our library, and we're talking about a very, very small percentage of the books. I just don't want my child to have access to those books without my acknowledgement and saying it's okay for my child to have it. Because any other place outside of a library, it's illegal. Thank you very much. I hope you'll support this bill. Excuse me. I'm happy to work on tweaking it so we don't have any other issues with it and clarify anything. I've spent a lot of time working with different organizations this year to make sure that we don't impact anything that happened during the Holocaust and other types of things. So we reviewed just about every one of these books to make sure that we didn't impact that. We work with national level groups to ensure that we didn't touch anything associated with the Holocaust or any books related to that, and then a lot of other books that went back historically to issues like that. But again, I'm just saying, if it's illegal outside the library, I want to be able to say, yes, it's okay for my child to see it or not. That's it. And thank you.
Are there any other comments? Senator Howard.
Well, all of this strikes me as very sort of almost old-fashioned because the kids have access to the internet.
With parental controls.
Sometimes. So, any child will have access to all sorts of horrifying things.
Thank you, Senator. And I'll just add one final comment. I think, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Abraham made my point at the end of his remarks in terms of we've been hearing a lot over this last year about parental rights and transparency, and we have to give more rights to parents and so forth. What are these parents telling their children in the home? And if parents are not taking responsibility in the house about what they're saying to their children relative to these kinds of materials, it isn't going to mean anything if that child is going outside of that house and going to a library and accessing these materials. It doesn't mean anything if that child is going to say, okay, Mom, Dad, I'm not going to, and then go to the library to access materials if Mom and Dad isn't saying to that child in the house that accessing this kind of material is wrong. So if they aren't saying to that child that this is wrong in the house, this isn't going to mean anything. Even if the mom and dad signed a piece of paper saying you can't access it. This doesn't mean anything.
Thank you, Senator. I'll just also make a comment. I think the point you're making that should a child access material outside of the school library, the person who gave them that material could be arrested. There's an intentionality in that then. There is a legal intentionality if a child is being deliberately cultivated, given materials and so forth. That same kind of intentionality, illegal intentionality, simply doesn't exist in our school libraries. Our school librarians are not intentionally putting material into the hands of children in order to lead them in a different direction. So I think there's a distinction that necessarily needs to be made on that point.
Happy to do it. And outside, Madam Chair, and outside of our libraries, a child wouldn't be able to buy these books that contain these graphic images that contain this without being over 18 years of age, because it's required on those materials that you have to be over 18 to purchase those materials.
I think we will agree to disagree on this point because our school libraries are there are age-appropriate materials that are being selected, not X-rated or 18-plus materials is the point that I would continue to make. But I think we've belabored the point considerably. Is there a motion on the floor?
There is, move to report.
Is there any other?
Substitute motion.
Is there a substitute motion?
Move to pass, recommend passing by indefinitely. Second.
Its substitute motion has been made to pass by indefinitely. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. The ayes have it. We will recommend pass by indefinitely.
Thank you for your time and indulgence.
Thank you. So I know we have Senator Boysko and Senator McPike. McPike, if you don't mind, if we could do Senator Boysko first. She has just two bills, and easy peasy, is that what you said?
Yes, ma'am. I have two bills, Madam Chair. One of them I would ask that we pass by for the day, and I have a second bill. So I would like to pass by SB 1102, and I would like to ask you to
Please go
consider
ahead.
SB 1146. That would be okay. Madam Chair, I'm presenting SB 1146, which is a cleanup bill to the legislation we passed last year known as Elijah's Law in order to make the implementation process more effective. This is supported by the administration. They actually reached out to me to request that we come back with it, and the Virginia Department of Education. Elijah's father also is supportive of this and has been involved in the process. By changing the application of the bill from early childhood, and just to remind you all, this was the EpiPen bill. The little boy, Elijah, died tragically after eating a grilled cheese sandwich, and the bill was to get EpiPens in the hands of child care providers. So we just have some technical changes. I'm happy to talk about them. One of them is changing early childhood care and education entity to child daycare center. It would be extended to centers that care for children after school and would apply to those centers and programs serving kids 5 and older. It would also, because EpiPens are expensive and some of the home-based daycare providers have asked, it would, instead of requiring them to have EpiPens, would ask that they be trained in the administration of epinephrine and to recognize allergic reactions. I have a speaker if you have any questions on the technical merit of it. We know that the most common cause of anaphylactic response is food allergy. These are life-threatening and can happen within seconds. Infants and toddlers are particularly at risk. And, I know that this bill directs the Department of Education to assist the daycare settings to establish policies, procedures, and trainings to help prevent these anaphylactic responses and recognize the signs and symptoms of a suspected event, and ensures that there's first-line treatment for anaphylaxis, which is based specifically for our smaller children, which is different than an adult. Happy to answer any questions you all may have. The administration, as I said, has been involved in the bill. It is a cleanup bill, and I'm here for any other questions.
Thank you, Senator. Are there any questions or comments from committee members?
I believe it should be a pretty easy bill.
And it's been moved and seconded that we recommend reporting the bill. All in favor? Aye. Any opposition? No. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the consideration.
Thank you, Senator. And then Senator McPike. Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senate Bill 1041. I have three bills: Senate Bill 1041, 1044, and 1045. And if acceptable, we'll start with Senate Bill 1041.
Please go ahead.
This is a bill that actually much of the bill is the layout of what the Board of Education currently uses to determine qualifications for school superintendents. But what it does is it inserts a new threshold of essentially excluding sort of the no background experience for populations of 140,000 population and above. And so currently there's a carve out, a Rule 4 that says that if you don't have any educational background whatsoever, you can still go through the process. But larger populations, frankly, they can still draw lots of candidates that have doctorates and lots of educational background to those localities. This sets this out in the code to sort of distinguish a sort of a benchmark and a threshold. So that is the bill to make sure sort of, there might be, maybe there are some challenges in very small school districts, but this sort of sends a new benchmark to make sure that there are really world-class candidates serving these localities.
Thank you, Senator. I have a notation that VEA has a technical amendment. Do you want to provide that technical? Please come on up. You can sit right here. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dr. Emily Yen. I am with VEA, and the Virginia Education Association is not taking a position on this bill, but they are making a technical amendment regarding the degree language. So in the current language, it specifies a doctorate in educational administration or a doctor in educational leadership. And I wanted to point out that there's actually several different names of different degrees, doctorates in the educational field. So you can have a PhD in education that, as well as an EDD, an educational doctorate degree. And some of the programs have an administrative component to it, or one's dissertation can be about administration or leadership, but that is not in the degree title. And so what I would recommend would just changing it to a doctorate in the educational field.
Senator, do you accept that friendly amendment? Sounded like a friendly amendment.
Yes, Madam Chair, that'd be a friendly. I don't know if the exact council has the exact language of or related field or something similar to cover those comments.
Yes, Madam Chair. So the language that was used there with reference to doctorate degree in educational administration or educational leadership is taken directly from the administrative code, the board's regulations for division superintendent license, option 1. So that is why that specific terminology was used. However, I don't see any reason why in the code, since it does exist in the regulations already in more specific terms, it could be amended to say doctor in educational field or education-related field.
Is there a motion to accept? Thank you. And a second? It's been moved and seconded that we adopt the recommended amendment. All in favor? Aye.
Madam Chairman, question?
Yes, Senator.
Madam Chairman, Senator McPike, was there a problem that triggered the bill?
Madam Chair, to answer the senator, there was some significant controversy in a locality, a fairly large locality that had a superintendent selection that had no classroom experience, no professional experience, training, zero.
Madam Chair.
Senator.
Madam Chair, Senator Pike, would the school board hire that person?
Madam Chair, that is correct.
And was it, Madam Chair, was it an elected school board?
That's correct.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any comments or questions, any additional comments or questions? Is there a motion on the floor?
Move to report as amended.
It's been moved and seconded that we recommend for reporting as amended. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We have 3 ayes, 1 no, and 1 abstention. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next bill is Senate Bill 1044. This is a bill that, following up on some of the mental health work we've done and you guys have participated in, which is the new 988 number. And so it requires the placement of the phrase 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline to help educate students that this is an available resource to them as a simple print edition. It does not require the replacement of all existing school identification cards. It's just as new ones are issued out that they're simply updated with the new information to increase awareness, because we all know, we've seen the data over the last couple of years, there are a lot of folks struggling, and we need to make sure folks have the resource and know about that resource that's available to them.
Yes, Senator Peake.
Madam Chair, that is correct. It was intentionally written to avoid having school systems having to wholesale replace. Some of those IDs are used for multiple years. We just want to make sure as new ones or replacements are issued that they are updated with new information.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Is there a motion on the floor? It's been moved and seconded that we recommend reporting the bill. All in favor? Aye. Aye. 5 ayes on that. Thank you. And your final bill, Senator Mike Pike? I'm messing up the peaks and the pikes here.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. The next is Senate Bill 1045. It won't be the last one either, will it? Senate Bill 1045, and I do have a committee amendment to offer on this bill. This is a part of...
Let's accept the amendment. Is there a motion? It's been moved and seconded that we accept the amendment. All in favor? Aye. Please go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a recommendation from the School Construction and Modernization Commission. As you know, over the last couple of years, we have met, and in fact, we together have collectively budgeted significant resources to school construction. One of the things that the commission reviewed, and that commission is made up of general services, school superintendents. It's a pretty wide group, including a BOE member and members of the General Assembly. One of the concerns was, after investing hundreds of millions of dollars in school reconstruction, what we want to do is to make sure we have the fiscal framework in place for each of the localities to make sure they have at least a minimum ongoing capital level of effort. And so what the amendments do to better tweak the intended language is basically on average, because understanding that school boards, the total building replacement value is what the goal is, to at least have 1.5 on average. So what happens is some years you might have very little, but you have a major renovation. That major renovation to that existing asset counts towards that 1.5 overall average aggregate. What we don't want to do is 10 years down the road, we're in the same hole without sort of the discipline to make sure that the continued renewed investment is there. And so for comparison, just for an awareness, industry average is about 1.5 to 3% in terms of what you need to actually maintain your capital assets over the lifespan of the building. So I chose the very minimal 1.5% as the minimum baseline. If you don't do that, you're going to have leaky roofs, broken HVAC, and we're going to be back at the same spot in 10, 20 years from now after spending and investing hundreds of millions of dollars. And we know we have a backlog of $3 billion plus in our school system. And so it really is to make sure as we do the investments, we at least have the fiscal framework moving forward to support renewal of these facilities.
Please go ahead, Senator.
You're on 1045, right?
Yes.
I'm just having a hard time seeing how the amendments fit in with the language.
Senator McPike, can you speak to that question?
Sure. Absolutely. So the first two are changes to the actual titles themselves. If you go to line 14, gets to the more substantive. And so line 14, you strike reserve. So it read a school building maintenance capital target of at least 1.5% of the replacement value of such buildings on average to avoid major replacement costs in the future. Okay, so read together, it sort of make sure it's not a quote-unquote reserve. In other words, the schools don't have to sit on the money for a year. So we struck that language to make it sure it's simply part of the capital budget process, and then to insert to make it very clear in the last amendment that is the buildings on average. It simply recognized that you might have a small HVAC project one year, a building, a roof replacement 1 year, but a major renovation in year 5 of your capital plan, all of that still counts towards that 1.5.
Does that answer your question, Senator? Okay.
And I know you'll have some comments or testimony from a few folks probably on this as well.
I think we have Dr. Smith here to speak.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Tom Smith, Superintendent's Association, and I've been working with the patron and appreciate some clarification on the language to help us better understand. My main issue here is the state is going to mandate 1.5%, and we understand where that's coming from, that as in the past, we would hope the state would help fund that with stuff in the budget. You all were tremendously helpful last year in terms of school construction in many, many ways, particularly the funds that you did. But we still have some small localities that this added money is going to make being difficult. I remember as a superintendent and some of the table made that the state did have school maintenance as part of the budget some years ago. And so if we could just reinstate that in some way of doing it, I think it would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak either in support or in opposition? Okay. Is there a motion on the floor? Yes, I'm sorry.
Senator McPike, so this is actually saying to the local school board that they have to put up 1.5% of their budget toward building maintenance.
Madam Chair, I'd say it is really capital maintenance versus what you would consider as filter changes and belts, et cetera. It is really capital, depending on the accounting terms, is typically something that's lasting 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And so it is sort of the larger expenditure side, not necessarily the filters and the rest of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, but yes is the basic, just to clarify. That is typically the minimum, the bare minimum to keep up an asset. And certainly this, obviously in our budget, we are putting significant funds into local and hopefully some more as well. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, right now, we're not in the posture of the capital maintenance. We're certainly in the posture in our budget to try to help the capital renewal overall. And so we want to make sure we just don't get in that same hole 10, 20 years from now as well.
Okay. Understanding that most localities most school systems must rely on their localities for their budgets. Okay.
Senator McPike, Senator Locke's question raises in my mind, will the localities be allowed to roll over these funds on an annual basis if they don't use them to make any improvements in a particular year?
So, Madam Chair, the appropriations balance typically in capital is rolled over. Again, it's not reserved, it's project specific on those renewals. So if elementary school A, again, has certain replacement in year 3 of the CIP, elementary school, Y has a different, all those amounts average up over across the entire portfolio. So it's much like budgeting your own house replacement, whether you've got roof coming up or siding, you need to figure that over time. But it sort of averages your overall expenditures. So typically, it's obviously up to the governing body of whether they roll over, quote unquote, those funds or not, or they reappropriate those balances. But typically, capital will still continue from one year to the next if it's been appropriately. Well, not to use all the technical terms, but there's ways to do it financially. But.
I'm seeing some vigorous head nods in support of what you just said. Okay. So, okay. Are there any additional questions? Okay. Is there a motion on the floor? Move to report. Second. It's been moved and seconded that we recommend reporting. All in favor? Aye. We have 5 ayes, and thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And I believe that completes, or is there another? Oh, yes, I am sorry.
May I present from here?
Yes, you may, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is Senate Bill 1253, and it is student assessment. And it is really an opportunity to make sure that teachers, parents, administrators all have on record the cumulative testing scores as soon as possible so that they are communicated. It'll allow the teachers to be able to act on behalf of the children, to collate all that information. It is something that is actually just codifying federal law as it is now. And so that is the bill. I'm happy to elaborate on that. I know there's some people to talk to it, but we have spoken before about the challenge that teachers sometimes have in going to multiple websites in order to collate the information or take the actions they need to take in the classroom each day. So for the teachers, I see this as being a incredible asset, as well as for parents.
Thank you, Senator. Are there any questions or comments from the committee? You said you had some individuals who wanted to speak in support. Any in opposition? Let me start there first. Okay, then, and then in support, it sounds like there's not opposition to this legislation.
We don't need much.
Good afternoon again, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you. My name is Shelley Loving-Ryder. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Student Assessment, Accountability, and ESEA programs at the Department of Education. And as Senator Donovan mentioned, this bill does rectify an issue with Virginia law, and it does amend the standards of quality to ensure that parents, teachers, and other school leaders who deal with students have access to student test results as soon as is possible after the test is administered. This would impact the standards of learning assessments, which I think most of you are familiar with, but also the Virginia Alternate Assessment Program tests that are given to students with significant cognitive disabilities who are unable to take the SOL test.
Okay, thank you. It's been. Did you want to make a comment? Please go ahead. Please come up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be quick. We had Shane Riddle, Virginia Education Association. We had originally had no position on this bill, but I wanted to make it known that we moved to a position of support primarily because teachers are also included and other school personnel are also included. My understanding is that there may be another bill in the hopper on the Senate side in regards to something called the backpack portal or something like that to provide a dashboard for parents to access testing data, and we are not so sure that teachers and other school personnel are involved or included in that piece. So we would encourage that when that comes over, maybe it could be wrote into it or something like that. But thank you for bringing this, and so we are in a position of support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. VEA support then. I think we have a motion to motion to recommend reporting, and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? You have 5 ayes. And I think that concludes our docket then. Well, thank you so much to everybody who joined us this afternoon, and thank you so much to the committee members. Appreciate everything. The meeting is adjourned.